Thank you, ladies and gents. You can take your seats. Thank you very much. And thanks again to Westgrow. It was really nice, our tea break. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Just one announcement, and that is Mike Green. You'll see the list there. Mike Green, the introduction of our National Council. That Mike Green will be replaced by Sarel Leroux. That's for the Eastern region. So just that one Sarel Leroux, Eastern production region. That's right, yeah. Everyone, just in the last announcement about the table plan, please make your arrangements with the table plan. And now it's my big privilege to ask our newly elected chairman, Murray Thompson, just to say a few words. Let's welcome him. A warm welcome. Murray, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to say it is a really humbling experience to be nominated and to be elected as Chairman of Potato South Africa. I'm here to serve all of you as role players in the industry, and I hope that I can make, along with Willie and his team, a positive contribution to our industry that we all care about so much and love so much. So thank you very much to you all. I'll be around this evening if you want to introduce yourselves to me. I would really appreciate meeting each and every one of you. Right. Hand signs as well, France anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. You paid your school fees, really. Now, talking about that, I just read an interesting article this morning on how expensive school fees are, and especially homeschooling. Did you know that homeschooling, it costs you about 8,000 Rand average per child? If you don't drink, 600 Rand. But I mean, it's still very expensive. Something is expensive. Ladies and gents, we're going to, one of our main sponsors, our main sponsor for this event, and we'd really like to give him a warm welcome. It's a word from DP World. William Sears, it's so great to have you here today. It's such a privilege. Let's give him a big hand of applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's a great privilege for us to be here. We proudly sponsor and support Potato SA. I think, you know, when we talk about the future, it creates lots of uncertainty, lots of anxiety. And, you know, as farmers, you deal with uncertainty and unpredictability all the time. So this should really be nothing for you. So, you know, if we go forward to 2050, I think there's some key macro trends that we must consider when we start thinking about farming and how the farming landscape could look different. I think the first of the trends is, you know, the rise of AI. I think it's important to realize that this technology is at its nascent stage. It's only going to get better. You know, what we're seeing now is incredible. It's mind-blowing, but I think we've just started. I think the second is the change in population demographics. I think if you look across the world, I think the latest figures show that our current population is 7.8 billion. By 2030, 8.6 billion, and by 2050, 9.8 billion. And I think that's further complicated by their big swings. There are lots of areas in the globe that are declining rapidly and lots of areas that are growing rapidly. So I think the flow of trade and the flow of product is going to look very different. And then, you know, I think climate change, we are seeing more and more as top of mind of all of our customers. I think sustainable solutions, efficiency, and green logistics and green solutions to problems that have previously been ignored are going to be pushed to the top of the agenda. And I think, although there's no clear winner in investments, we're going to have to keep on thinking and reinventing our green programs. So before I go on and talk about the future and technology, I just want to introduce DP World to you. So I think if we look at DP World was traditionally a ports-based company. About 10% of the world's trade touches a DP World port. We are now in 82 countries. We have 112,000 employees, and we handle about 95 million containers across the globe. We have about $400 billion of capital deployed. $40 billion of capital deployed. And we have about now 180 freight forwarding offices worldwide. I think if you look more specifically about sub-Saharan Africa, DP World is heavily invested. So DP World in the past 3 years invested $3 billion in sub-Saharan Africa, 1 billion of which was in South Africa, and that was the acquisition of the old Imperial Logistics. And in the coming 3 years, DP World will invest more or less another $3 billion in sub-Saharan Africa. I think we have a presence in 48 countries. We deliver to about 400,000 locations a month, and we employ just about 27,000 employees. We have fleets that we own of about 8,000 vehicles, and we purchase, give or take, 4,000 on the subcontracted market. We have ports in Dar es Salaam, Maputo, Senegal, Angola, and a dry port in Kamati Port. So we heavily invested in ports and infrastructure. So we are very bullish on the region, and we see it as our role to connect Africa with the world and the world with Africa. I think we think that we can play a key role in driving efficiencies in terms of logistics and getting product into and out of Africa. So if we move on to the next slide, before I get into talking about AI and future, just a health warning, I'm neither a technology expert nor a futurist. So please, for a lack of a better pun, don't bet the farm on anything I'm going to say. I also think when we start talking about 2050, we start dealing lots in opinion and less in fact. So please take the context with that. So I think if we look at automation and autonomous farming, we see some of the trends in terms of the latest John Deere platforms, the success they've had with precision farming. I think when we look at the amount of data and the processing power that has come to the fore in this field and the realm, it's not absolutely impossible that we start moving to largely autonomous farms in the future. So if you look at self-driven and autonomous vehicles, that seemed very far-fetched 3 or 4 years ago. There are now 3 cities in America that you can hail a robot cab. So you can go to San Francisco, Phoenix, or Austin and hail a robot cab, and it will be totally machine-driven. If you've ever driven in San Francisco, it's a terrifying experience. So, I'm happy that I'll never have to drive there again. So I think the future here is moving very fast. They have solved it in those locations by creating heavy geofences and actually lots of processing. So it's not a scalable, sustainable solution. But if you look at what Tesla's doing, Tesla is starting to train through cameras and processing vehicles to drive. Their city auto-driven vehicles, not yet 100% successful, but the long-distance vehicles very close to successful. So I think this is a space that the future will move quickly. I think, and when you start talking about autonomous farming, you start talking about precision farming, you talk about applying exactly the correct amount of fertilizer to the seed. We were in Switzerland and we got played back the John Deere case study where they used 30% less fertilizer because they were applying it to exactly a specific geolocation as opposed to spraying it generically across the field. And I think given that there will be more mouths to feed, I think efficiencies and automation will be a key differentiator in farming in the coming years. I think the next slide that I want to talk to is the rise of AI and the acceleration of technology. So I think to understand where this has come from, you have to go back a bit. I think if you go back, the first computer probably surfaced in the late 40s. It was used to crack the Enigma code, and it was invented by Alan Turing. Alan Turing in the 50s created a test to measure machine intelligence. He called it the imitation game. 1952, a computer was programmed to play checkers, and in 55, AI was first coined. So, here we are in the heart of AI. I think if you jump forward to 1997, Deep Blue, the IBM supercomputer, beat Garry Kasparov, And there was an outcry. It was thought that the computer would never be able to beat a human at chess. And the comments that Kasparov gave after he lost his first game, he wasn't sure he'd ever win another game. And I think if you look where we are now in 2024, humans aren't competitive. So there's a more complex game of Go that now the computers are dominating. They're dominating fields of poker where there's a combination of extreme mathematics, but also facial recognition and pattern recognition. So this is really moving quickly, and I think lots of people get creates anxiety, but I think it creates upside, it creates economic prosperity. So there are broad and varying estimates, but figures that I've seen are that the rise of AI could generate as much as a 14% lift in global GDP. I think if you look at Moore's law of processing power, he founded Intel co-founder of Intel in 1971. In 1973, he wrote Moore's law that said processing power would approximately double every 2 years, and it's kept true. So Intel are currently manufacturing a chip that will have 1 trillion processors on it. And I think that processing power has enabled machine learning. So ChatGPT, as its training, has ingested the entire written internet. So it has literally ingested every piece of data on the internet as its training. And that with processing power gives, it's counterintuitive, but it gives it lots of language skills and lots of pattern recognition and less mathematics skills. But I think that's going to continue evolving. I'm saying, what does that mean for farming? So in an environment where there is so much uncertainty and you cannot relate a set of arbitrary facts like soil temperature, barometric temperature, rainfall, supply and demand, I think that once you ingest all of those facts and you have the right software sitting behind that, it will start finding patterns. And will it ever say, do this and do that? No. But what it will do is it will give you a set of parameters to say, think about doing this. This pattern has repeated itself again. We're seeing it again. Why don't you try this? And I think if you think of the world you play in, I think if you start getting bigger exposure and shortening the supply chain through visibility and understanding all the nodes, you can add immense value and create immense efficiencies and reduce waste. So I think this technology and the integration that will come from it will in the future be seamless, but it will shorten from farm to fork. It will give more visibility, more control, and allow you to make more of the correct decisions at the right time. So where have we used this in our business? I think it's easy to walk the talk, but to talk. But we have used this at our port at Jebel Ali. So the whole port is cloned digitally. So it means that we have a digital twin of the port. The digital twin monitors all the activity. It monitors all of the machines. It monitors all of the containers. It runs large model simulations, and it has determined over time where we were inefficient, and it's proposed solutions to that. We have then designed, I think if we jump to the next slide, we've designed a box bay that is solar powered that gives us the ability to stack boxes and containers on one another that changes the dynamic and eliminates lots of moves. So when we built that design, we tested it on the simulation, and the simulation then gave us a very clear answer what the benefit would be and what the payback on investment would be. And we found that even at a port that was very efficient, we've managed to eliminate 350,000 wasted touches and improve efficiency by 20% an annum. So this more and more will find its way into the business, and I think the application of AI doesn't have to be complicated. So we are playing now at proposal writing. We spend onerous amounts of time on proposal writing, and we think that once we ingest all of our historic proposals into an AI software or an AI front end, it can allow us to quickly piece together proposals, and as opposed to always doing it at the last minute and rushing, allow us to get quality proposals out and improve every time we submit a proposal. So I don't think every time you use the application of AI new technology, it has to change the world. If we jump forward, I think if I had to take away and say, you know, what could potentially be an easy win for you as a community? I think visibility. I think we are creating, almost as a standard practice, digital twins of all our supply chains. We create visibility from farm to point of consumption. We are looking at a solution where we collect product in East Africa and we deliver to factories around the world, where we manage that in real time, and we create a digital twin that allows us to understand where we've wasted time, where we've lost money because of efficiencies, where product quality has suffered because of inefficiencies and leads, run multiple scenarios. And I think by investing in visibility, you have to get a couple of things right. You have to get data structures right, you have to get master data right, and you almost also have to work as a collective. You know, visibility of your own patch doesn't really add as much value as collective visibility, and I think that is one way as a community you can become more competitive, and we think creating visibility in the data structures is an enabler for almost all AI and technology that comes down the line. So for me, that's where I would say you should focus, and if you're looking for an easy win, I think that could possibly be an area. And yeah, that's what we'd say. In conclusion, I think lots is going to change, but you guys are used to living in a world with change and uncertainty, so I don't think there's anything you need to be scared of. I think given what we see and what we understand, I think that farming is a big net benefactor of the technology and the AI that's coming at us. And I think, for me, I think if you ever get time and you get bored, go and ask ChatGPT to compose you a song, an inspirational song about your hometown. Type in your hometown, it will take 20 seconds, it will pull up a song, and then it's going to ask you, you can take it to another application, it's going to say, do you want a rock ballad, a rap song, or country and western? You choose a rap song. It will put it into that. 20 seconds later, you'll have a song that you thought was written by Bruce Springsteen. It is phenomenal where this is going. So I think we don't know the answers. I am not pessimistic or concerned about different outcomes. I think this is a massive avenue to create efficiencies and productivity across all of our supply chains. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, William. We're going to watch a video now.
Do you know when trade is at its best? It's when you never have to think about it. When it's so convenient, it almost feels invisible. Trade is at its best when it makes getting something, no matter how big or small, from one place to another, feel like handing it over with your own hands. Making the world flow better. A way to make another country feel like next door. To make a stranger feel like a neighbor. To change what's possible for everyone. For us, trade isn't about running ports. It's about opening portals. Portals to millions of people, but also to a better future.
Ladies and gents, our main sponsor, DP World, CEO of DP World, William Sears. Thank you a mil for your valuable contribution to the success of this event and also your business relationship with our organization. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you. Right, it's my privilege to announce our last session, and please just stay behind after the panel discussion, just for a few arrangements for tonight. And yeah, our panel consists of Janet Lawless, panel facilitator, she's from Inteligro, and then our panel members, Pieter Geldenhuys from the Institute for Technology, Strategy and Innovation, also Associate Professor of NWU. Thank you, Pieter, man with a nice name. And then also William Sears, no introduction necessary, of DP World SA, Chris Pienaar of Bayer, and also we have Henny Groenewald, CEO of Biosafety Africa, and then Murray Thompson, also no introduction necessary. Jen, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pieter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our first panel discussion this afternoon. I'm Lawless, a proud member of Inteligro, and I will be your facilitator for this afternoon's panel discussion. Today we are here to discuss some of the most pressing and forward-thinking topics, not only in the potato industry, but also globally. And this panel will aim to provide insights and spark conversation that can lead to innovative solutions and strategies for the future. Our discussion will include a range of topics from technology advancements, crop protection, new breeding technologies, and global predictions. This panel discussion is particularly significant as it will set the scene for the rest of the panel discussions that will follow tomorrow. The insights and the ideas that we will generate here will form the foundation for more focused discussions in the upcoming sessions tomorrow. So before I introduce the panelists, which Pieter actually did, thank you, Pieter. I'd like to just quickly explain the format of this session. Each panelist will have about 30 to 40 minutes to present their topics. No, luckily it won't be 30 to 40 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to present their topics and their future predictions. And following that, we will transition into a panel discussion where we will engage in dialogue and share some insights and views that we've got on the topics covered. If you're not feeling welcome at this stage, panelists, very welcome. I've also arranged for a half jack of OBS under the seats, just to make you more comfortable. Thank you for that cue, Pieter. Where's Pieter? Thank you. Okay, so let's start off. It's my pleasure then to, Pieter, introduce you and to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts. Pieter will have a discussion on the world's worst predictions and also give some insights and reasons to why these predictions. Thank you, Pieter.
Thank you, Janet. I'm just going to grab the remote. So when Willie asked me to talk about this topic, this is completely off character because I'm by nature an optimist. I love the new technologies that'll shape our world, but you know, who can say no to Willie? So let's go and talk about what is some of the predictions. And when I spoke to Willie, I gave him a few of my predictions, and he said, Pieter, not that bad, you know, dial back. So I'll try and manage expectations. Here was Apollo 13. So if you take a look at Apollo 13, something happened. You know, they launched this mission to the moon, hopefully to go and walk on it. And about 18,000 miles, I think it's about 34,000 odd kilometers away from Earth, there was an explosion, and they lost most of the propellant and the oxygen. And they didn't know what the hell they can do to get back to Earth. Most of their oxygen was gone, their propellant was gone, and they decided to then use the moon as a slingshot to come back to Earth. But the problem is they didn't have any oxygen because in the two modules, the lander module as well as the modules, they didn't have enough oxygen. And this metaphor we use in the world of innovation. There are three key lessons. What drives innovation? We'll come back to Apollo 13 towards the end because there's a couple of lessons for us as well in terms of this mission. The three key things that drive innovation, guess what they are? Well, ask the people in that module. They'll tell you. So when we talk about Apollo 13, what's really important, let me give you a couple of very, very weird scenarios based on what Willie required me to do. So one of the key challenges we'll face is a possible solar flare. Imagine a solar flare that takes out all satellites around the Earth, and suddenly there's no GPS. Okay, we might have some connectivity left, but how many sailors do you know that can now navigate using a sextant and finding out where the stars are? Just imagine the impact in the short term if suddenly our GPS systems get wiped out in the next 24 hours. And that's a real possibility because we've had a number of these solar flares already. Now that's a bad scenario, but what impact will this have on trade, on food supplies, and so forth? Another very interesting or very scary scenario, and we covered that 2 years ago, where I spoke to you about the fact that we're moving beyond the world of globalization. We're now going to the world of deglobalization. Under COVID, we saw that a number of countries couldn't get the necessary parts that they wanted, and they say, bugger this world where we have to rely on the world to supply us with parts, it's over. We are going to manufacture our own equipment and parts inside our own geographic regions. And we're seeing specifically microchips and EVs being the reindustrialization is taking place in Europe and in America. But there's one very scary scenario. Do you know that 90% of the high-end microchips is made in Taiwan? And you all have read the news that China really wants to take over Taiwan. So what will the scenarios be that might play out in the next 2 years? We may see a Chinese blockade of Taiwan. So instead of invading it, they put a blockade around it. The moment that happens, the Americans will react with sanctions, at which point the Chinese will hit a cyber attack on anything that's moving. So imagine your bank shutting down or your telecommunication capabilities being severely hampered. And we then expect the Americans to cut all fiber optic cables. So the easiest way to stop the Chinese hacking anyone is to simply go and look at all the places where the fiber optic cables run under the ocean. We cut that off, and that means that the Chinese won't have an easy way of doing it. And they'll also block the movement of fuel into China. Do you know what impact this will have on global trade? Well, that is if America is interested in playing the role of the cowboy. But what's fascinating is if you look at the research in the United States right now, 80% of Republicans and 45% of Democrats are saying America should move out of the rest of the world. It's not that as if they are planning to move out of the world, they already have. Now, our entire economic system on the planet today is America is keeping our seaways safe. It's part of the Bretton Woods system. But America is not in the mood, and to really be honest, they don't have the kit available to keep the seaways of the world safe anymore. Do you know that 2/3 of the traffic around the Suez is now channeled around Cape Town? Why? Because the Houthis are firing missiles at ships that it doesn't like, that it gets from Iran. Now, all the critical choke points at the Malacca Straits, the Strait of Hormuz, Bab al-Bandar, these are the choke points that can actually harness or restrict the flow of goods around the world. Imagine South Africa not having access to fuel for a period of time. So the challenge is that if America decides to stand back, we are going to see a rise in piracy, and we're going to see a rise in terrorist attacks, because who's going to stop them? So understand that whatever way you look at the world, we are going to see a changing world in the future, and we need to adapt to those changes. Willie, how am I doing? So the challenge is, it doesn't end there. If we take a look at what might happen in, guys, if you can get visuals on here. So what is happening, one of the predictions we're looking at is a collapse of the Russian state by about 2040. In a very autocratic state, if Putin dies, the day what happened with the Soviet Union, it broke up into smaller republics. There's a very real possibility that Russia, with more than 200 different languages and 200 ethnic groups, might also break up into smaller republics. There's one problem. There's about 4,000 nukes distributed through all of those provinces. What happened with the breakup of the Soviet Union? They went to Ukraine and they said, listen, you've got about 300 nuclear weapons. Please give it to us. And the Ukrainians said, what do we get in return? And they said, oh, we've got this wonderful agreement that we will protect you. So China signed it, and Russia signed it, and America signed it, and NATO signed it. And what happened 20 years later? Well, you can kind of guess what happened 20 years later. So do you think that these republics that might have a few nukes are going to give it back because of a security guarantee? Not a chance. And what do you think will happen to the Middle East if a number of very poor republics with nukes are sitting on the border of Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey? What do you think will happen when all of those small republics are sitting with nukes and the richer countries are not? We see the Middle East going nuclear in a matter of 2 years after that. Do you understand what that means? It means that our energy security will be very precarious at best. And we in South Africa will have to look at alternative energy security channels, mostly around our borders, Angola, Mozambique, and Nigeria. So these are but some of those very scary scenarios. But let me change perspective. Did you know that trade through the Panama Canal has dropped by 50% because of water shortages? So we are not only going to be seeing a degrading of the world of globalization, but currently, as it stands, is that the amount of traffic going through the Suez has dropped by 2/3. That's part of it is the Bab al-Mandab problem with the Houthis. And the Panama Canal has dropped by 50%. Why? Because they've got a shortage of water. So this means that finding things, getting access to things will become more difficult. One of the other key problems is global and climate change. One of the challenges that people in Europe may find is that Britain is far warmer than Moscow, which is sitting on the same latitude. The problem is that that current is now the weakest in 16,000 years. Do you know what will happen in Britain if they suddenly get a lot of snow? Absolute chaos. So aren't you glad you live in Africa? We are seeing a degrading of arable land. This is global land use, and there's a breakdown of what the land is being used for. But the problem is that we've already reached peak agricultural land about 20 years ago. This is the situation in South Africa. You can see we've already reached peak land. Now the amount of usable land will become less and less and less. Very, very bad news for us. The only other problem is demographic divergence. We're going to see an increase in population in Africa from about 1.2 billion people to northwards of 4 billion people by the end of the century, while the rest of the world will decline except the US. Now this means that we in Africa won't actually have a market to sell goods to because everyone is growing older, and but boy, they don't spend money after age 55 because you don't need to. So we are going to see a world where the African population will explode with a huge need for food. But at the same time, the rest of the world, where we would make money from an economic perspective, will decline. And this is Africa's population. We were approximately 818 million people on this continent a mere 20 years ago, in 2020. We're now at 1.4 billion. In the next 20 years, we will reach 2.6 billion. Do you get the movie? An unbelievable increase in population, but that means that the amount of arable land per population is rapidly declining, and that's where we are standing. So we are seeing unbelievable increase in population, a reduction in arable land per user, and that's scary. So arable land decline, one part of the movie, put suddenly 3 billion extra people on this continent, and you've got real interesting news. And with the decline in arable land around the world, look at that unbelievable decline as we see it over the last couple of years. This is a worldwide phenomenon. On the other end of the scale, this is how arable land changed over the last couple of decades. A fundamental drop in available land. And that's the scary part, where food production will fall because of it. Fortunately, we have technology. Wonderful technology like AlphaFold using artificial intelligence. And AlphaFold earlier this year mapped 200 million proteins. Just the context. It takes one PhD student 4 years to map one protein. Now we've got access to 200 million proteins. And we now have a computer interface freely available to anyone that wants to use it, to map new cultivars, to map new viruses, to see if that might be beneficial, to map new bacteria and proteins. Unbelievable technology which will shape our world. The message quite simply is, going back to my earlier slide, what are the 3 key things that drive innovation? Any guesses? 3 things. 1, scarcity. You don't innovate if nothing is scarce. If anything is abundance, you don't innovate. Ask societies that never innovated because everything was in abundance. You innovate because it's scarce. 2, there's a sense of urgency. We can't wait. We need to move now. And 3, a shift of perspective. We need to think in brand new ways, in novel new ways to solve our problems. My esteemed panel here and all of the esteemed speakers will speak about scarcity, and they will speak about a shift of perspective. My only message to you is, you can't wait. We are in an unbelievable era of urgency. Use the new technologies to harness the wonderful opportunities that exist. And on that point, my time is up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pieter, for very interesting predictions indeed. I'm looking forward to dig a little bit deeper into them in the panel discussion that will follow. But first, coming up, Chris, please share your thoughts on shaping crop protection in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Well, I don't know how I follow Pieter after that. I really like your geopolitical analysis, and very thought-provoking for sure. Well, first of all, my name is Chris Pienaar. I work in digital farming. I work for Bayer Crop Science, and I'm based in North Carolina in the United States. My focus is fruit and vegetables, and my team and I develop digital support tools looking at global markets. So that's kind of what we do. I was very pleased to get this invitation, and very thankful to be here, and feel very privileged. So thank you for that. Visioning is one of the things that I like doing, and my personal motto is not to be reactive to the future, but to actively go and create our preferred future today. So I'm super happy to be here with everybody. As I was thinking about our time together, I was wondering what could I share that could be useful. And I thought of talking about an emerging vision for the future of agriculture. It's a perspective, it's a global perspective, and it's also a perspective maybe coming from the angle of the traditional input providers. But I think it's worth sharing and talking about that. So I'll start with the challenges here, and here Pieter really teed me up very well. I didn't expect it to be teed up so well. I think if we look at the challenges going towards 2050, climate change will be with us. It will be the mammoth that we'll have to deal with. That is generally the consensus everywhere. The other one, of course, is food security, and also Pieter highlighted that. Now, what's the implications of those two big mega trends by 2050? Now, climate change is said to reduce arable land by 20%. My figures might differ slightly from what Pieter showed, but this is what we believe it is. 20% reduction in arable land by 2050. That, at the same time, climate change will also impact the yield on the farms. So it's expected to, on average, reduce by 17% by 2050. Now, on the flip side, you have a population growing, and it's estimated that we'll have to feed 2.2 billion more people by 2050. Now, that if you do the computation, you do the calculation, that would mean that we would have to produce 50% more on the available arable land, right? So a vision starts emerging of producing more food, increasing farm profitability, building climate resilience while we restore the land that we work on and just the planet overall. And that is a vision of regenerative agriculture, what is called regenerative agriculture. Doing more with less and restoring what we use. It also is potentially a place where the data and the carbon on the field becomes as important as the yield. So why would that vision unfold? I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's just look at the basic agricultural input providers right now. If you look at the markets, the seed and traits markets, the crop protection markets, those markets are growing at average 2% a year. I mean, these are not percentages that any investors are getting super excited about at the moment. But the vision of regenerative agriculture potentially brings an opportunity that doubles the agricultural market globally. Currently, the agricultural market is estimated to be at about 100 billion. And regenerative ag practices and the adjacent market spaces that will evolve would potentially increase that market to over 200 billion. Now, that, of course, would excite a lot of people to jump in behind that, right? And so, so what would be those adjacent spaces? The key ones that come up is precision application, biologicals, biocontrol, biostimulants, biofuels, another one as we decarbonize the supply chain and transportation, and then carbon, the carbon markets, of course, and then digital platforms and digital marketplaces are some of the spaces that we see evolving. Now, another trend I think that we will see is the farm's proximity to the consumer. And if you speak to private equity firms that are investing in controlled environment agriculture, they have a different vision of the farm. The farm is not a distant land that has the ability to grow, a few crops, and has been passed on from generation to generation. They are looking at the farm as a logistical hub, really placed close to the cities and where the customers are. And that's where they make the investments. These are also considered to be logistical hubs that are climate resilient. And but of course, not all the arable land can be relocated to the big cities. And this is where digital comes into play. So if you think about transparency from farm to fork, and it's been said here by William as well, I think we're going to see an interconnectedness and a transparency and a traceability from farm to fork that's going to make the matrix look like a documentary in future. And so a good example of that playing out, right, is what we've seen in China with Pinduoduo. I don't know if you are familiar with Pinduoduo, the retailer, fresh produce retailer in China. Now these guys, this is phenomenal. They started off in 2015 as a startup. And by 2021, they had connected 16 million growers, farmers, to 868 million consumers, cutting out a big portion of the supply chain in the middle, right? With a lot of additional cost savings in that process. So I will just conclude by saying that I think there's many technologies coming at us. There's many technologies that we see that's becoming available. The challenge is really going to be for us to be open and have a mindset of experimentation, right? Be open, because I think one of the things that concern us most is that a lot of these technologies will not be adopted on the farm and will not have the impact that we could see it having. So, yeah, I would say, and maybe a last point is, I don't think there's one technology that you can nail today to say that is the thing that you need to watch out for. I think it's going to be a combination and integration of multiple different technologies that will drive the impact. Anyway, I'll stop it there.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate your contribution. And before engaging in our panel discussion, I'm going to hand over the baton to Dr. Henny Groenewald. Thanks, Henny.
Thank you so much. Quickly, Henny Groenewald. I manage a platform funded by the National Department of Science and Innovation. My job is to facilitate bioinnovation in South Africa. So I'm a molecular biologist by training, so it means I know a little bit about a very, very small part of the world, and most of the rest I'm ignorant about. But I think there's a lot of talk about in the value chain in this huge, even if you just talk about potatoes, it's a big agricultural industry. So one of the first things I want to convince you about is that most of you, if you think about the value chain, you'll start at the potato, you'll end up probably at a plate, more or less. I want to convince you that there's something before the potato. Your industry is based on DNA, on genetics. If you look at the history of agriculture, it's pretty clear, with the Green Revolution in the 60s, whatever, genetics, the contribution that it can make. So that's the first aspect. So I think I'm going to have just three kind of parts in my quick introduction. The first one is this context, to say DNA is important because that is the foundation, that's the blueprint of the industry that you're actually working with. How can we use the innovation? Then I'm quickly going to go into the details. And then I want to step out again and say, okay, so how do we integrate that details with the industry? The details now, what I want to talk about, traditionally we selected parents, two that have traits that we like to combine, and we made a crossing. It's a little bit more complex because you're working with tetraploid, and you know that your turnaround in new cultivars and things are significantly different than other agricultural sectors that work with diploids that are fairly simple. Then we moved on to in vitro technologies where we can actually isolate cells and we can change them in vitro in the lab. It's basically what it means, and you can introduce mutations. There's more than 80,000 agricultural plants in the world that actually comes from mutational breeding, where they either irradiated the seeds with high energy, nuclear straling, I can't get to the word now, but high energy radiation, or things like chemicals, introducing, duplication and genetic material, all those type of things. Then we moved on to the GMO technology, which most actually agricultural environments did not really take advantage of. Still, South Africa's got only 3 crops, maize, soy, and cotton, that's GMO. GMO comes with a lot of baggage. There's a lot of history in GMO in potato as well. One of the first things that they deregulated in the US was actually BT potato. South Africa, the ARC went through a whole program. Eventually, it was not approved based on so-called socioeconomic issues. And it's primarily about the acceptance of the industry, including actually the potato industry itself. Now we moved on to the next set of, broadly, we can define it as still genetic engineering, but we're now talking about genetic genome editing. So editing is significantly different from genome or genetic modification because it's not about taking a BT insect-resistant maize, for example. You go and you take a BT, it's an insect resistance gene from a bacterium, and you transfer it to the maize, and now the maize is insect resistant. So it's that actually the crossing of the species and that natural cross of genetic material that actually created all of these value perceptions and issues in GMOs. But now with genetic or genome editing, what you're doing is you actually specifically target. You go and look at the genes, which Pieter also referred to earlier, and you can then change those genes in the plant. So traditionally, we were dependent on evolution. And evolution takes very slowly, but that's basically what evolution is there's mutation from the one generation to the other one. If that mutation, impacts a trait that benefits that organism, it will continue and it will be better competitive in the environment, and this is how you transfer it. We harness that potential through breeding. But now we actually have tools that we can go in and change genes specifically. So we can talk about changing the traits of the organisms. And in potatoes specifically, if you go and look at there's not been a genome-edited product commercialized yet, but there's lots of publications going around. Some of these technologies at the level that I just explained, for example, are not regulated at all in the US and in Australia. So they can now develop products and put them on the market just like a conventionally bred organism. The type of traits that we can look at that people can impact is either the input traits, so those are the things that impact and benefit the farmer. So, reduced nutrient requirements, for example, those type of things, better yields. But what gets me very excited about these technologies, there's a big focus. If you actually look at all the potato data that's available, 40% focuses on the quality of the product. So, it's improved nutritional value, for example. Those benefits that the end consumer can actually benefit from, and which, in my opinion, will have a very positive impact in the end of the day on these acceptance issues. So the last point I'm quickly going to make then is now I spoke about, that genetics is the basis of your industry. We have technologies. It's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you tomorrow people are going to start editing it. But this innovation aspect, we need to invest in that in lots of different ways. We need to create an environment that enables innovation. And that's a broad thing. Again, we can look at lots of different aspects of small little value chains within this, but it's from the researchers, the funding for the research, establish the basic technologies to enable the edits that we want to make, the things that Pieter referred to as well, understanding in the end of the day, any biological system is very plastic, what's the word? It can adapt So you can't just go in and change one gene and think, it's going to end up in a miracle. So we need to understand that. So the integration of the technology, things like artificial intelligence, for example, all of that is important. So the last point then is about, we need to, we have the will in the first place, and the shared vision of innovation from the people that's actually part of the industry to the regulatory system, for example, that we see a future for potatoes in South Africa, for example, and start from that positive perspective. We need that for innovation. Thanks.
Thank you, Henny. Appreciate. Now, I know whilst Henny was firing away, a lot of you guys were already formulating questions, and I actually forgot to say that we will have a dedicated time for questions at the end of our discussion. So please hold your questions. If time permits, there will be a mic going around, and you will have an opportunity to ask the panelists questions. Murray, you're not quite off the hook, no? Okay. So Murray, as a grower, listening to all these innovations, all these opportunities, daar waar die tekkie die teer tref, how do you think, what's your perception about the general feeling of potato growers in South Africa, about the future of potatoes in South Africa?
Annette, thank you very much. As a farmer in South Africa, and particularly a potato farmer, it's crucial to stay positive, not just for your business, but for your overall sanity. It's an extremely challenging environment. But nonetheless, I will be an optimist and say I think we are in the ultimate industry. I see going forward a greater percentage of the total calories being consumed in South Africa being potatoes, sort of irrespective of GDP per capita going up or down relatively. I think if it goes up, well, then everyone benefits from that. And if it goes down, I think, well, it's a good substitute. It's a lot of calories on a plate for a reasonably inexpensive product. So I think there are wonderful opportunities within our industry. That being said, us as farmers are, while not technophobic, we are quite techno-skeptic, let's say. And a lot of the technologies that are available to us that are being used in particularly places like Israel or the United States and a lot of places in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands, is fantastic. But the practical application of a lot of these technologies within the South African context is limited, largely due to the fact that the technical support that we have available to us here is limited. The generalized technical skills that are available to us on the farms, particularly on the platteland, as they say, is becoming even more scarce. So all these technologies are very difficult to maintain. That being said, what I see happening in the potato industry going forward is a gradual initially, but quite a rapid movement from fresh potatoes that it's roughly about 80% of our market at the moment, gradually moving and then all of a sudden moving towards processed potatoes, which have a whole bunch of advantages. They can freeze well. You're not worried about skin finish and various other issues. They transport a bit easier. You can transport a beneficiated product as well. And the technology that's, I feel, required in the shorter or the medium term, let's say the next 10 to 15 years, would definitely be in genetics and in cultivar development specifically. I think in that 10-year period, as us farmers move from fresh produce market type marketing towards processed potatoes, we're going to need dual purpose varieties, which are limited at the moment in their numbers and their effectiveness. I think that's going to be key. And new cultivars will also, I think, be the technology that's required to help us adapt to the changing chemical environment, where we just don't have the chemical molecules available to us in the industry as they're getting regulated sort of closer to the European model than what's been in the past. And I think a lot of the technology that is going to be coming in is not necessarily in all sorts of fancy things that many of us don't understand how they work or exactly how to use them, but it will come from genetics and from cultivars.
Chris, perhaps latching on to To Mari's comment about crop protection products and being aligned with EU and markets and international markets, what's your take on what's going to happen with crop protection within the general global call for applying less synthetic chemicals?
Yeah, I would say that, crop protection right now protects almost 30% of the world's food supply, right? So you're talking about over 2.2 million people are being protected by crop protection compounds, let's say. There is a drive towards biologicals, but I think there's a lot of advancements happening in synthetic chemistry development. And so Pieter was actually talking about this protein technology, right? And so what these crop protection chemicals do, they really block the functioning of a particular protein, either on an insect or in a disease, right? So now with these protein libraries that we have, the way it's often displayed, when our scientists develop these new molecules, they actually virtually 3D map the protein, and it's almost like they then create a molecule that they can virtually look at the protein as a lock, and they can find the key that actually blocks that particular functioning, by playing around with molecules. It's becoming super sophisticated, which will lead us to developing new modes of action. The chemistry will be far more effective. They will be far more selective in their application, with pretty good safety profiles as well. So I think that's definitely happening right now, and that would accelerate going forward. It does bring in the whole issue about resistance management, right? And so there's further technologies that's being looked at. Instead of protein blocking or compounds blocking the protein's functioning, there's developments happening in terms of protein degradation. And so certain compounds that help with a specific targeted protein degradation that would then potentially get us over the resistance issues that we have.
Going back to Mari's comment about where will the increases in production come from in the next few years, Henny, we've seen in the late 1900s, we've seen, and as you mentioned, the introduction of GMOs, and we're still only with that three crops, maize, soybean, and cotton. But perhaps from your point of view, from a breeding point of view, what is the newest technology that's knocking on the door, and what kind of an environment should we create for these technologies to actually be commercialized in South Africa?
So on a genetics level, it's about genome editing or precision breeding. So you can get quite lost in the terminology, and the terminology is actually one of the issues here. I think it's important that we must segregate the biology and the biological issues, and then all of these other soft issues, that relate to things like perceptions, and example is biologicals, for example, or organic versus other components. At the end of the day, when we talk about the biological reactions or whatever, they're basically the same. So the technology is available, and you can use the technology, but it doesn't stand alone. You can't use it in isolation. You do need, and this is why I like this whole idea of a value chain, or feeding back through the value chain. You only have innovation when you make a real positive impact. Innovation is not just an idea that somebody has and it's new and you can publish it and whatever, and you have the ability to do it. In a context, in an industry like this, innovation in my mind is something that adds value to the industry. So coming back to genome editing, it's for the first time ever we are able to go into a whole genome and then identify a specific gene and then change the sequence, because those sequences have the impact on the protein structures and the activities and the fluxes and all those things. Because in the end of the day, when you look at the potato and its protein structures and the activities and the fluxes and all those things, because in the end of the day, when you look at the potato and it's about, the protein versus the starches or whatever, but all of that is based on metabolic reactions. And we need to better understand those, and we now have the ability to then, if we understand those complex fluxes through the metabolism, to actually intervene in a very specific way. And I think that is where the technology is. But you also ask, what do we need to do that? And I can come back to the three things that we also mentioned. I think in the first place is, specifically in our context and in bioinnovation, we need a shared vision, I think, in terms of this. So it can come, there's different ways of looking this from the bottom up. I would say it's a science and up, or you can come all the way down from a policy. We have a national bioinnovation strategy, for example, that enables and puts everything in place. Then we have regulations underneath that. And the sector where I work, there's actually 6 different government departments involved in regulating this. We need better coordination and a shared vision in terms of those things, because this innovation also does not only apply to agriculture. There's health and there's biodiversity, there's industrial application, etc., etc. So the bottom line is we must say, what is the future or innovation? What's the value that innovation can hold for South Africa and all of this in terms of the technology? And then we must create an environment from all of these different environments, from regulation all the way to enabling researchers to do the groundwork. Because also, if you tell them, I want an engineered potato tomorrow, you're not going to get it because the information is not there, the infrastructure, the skills is not necessarily here.
Henny, while we're at it, talking about the environment, what is the current state of affairs with regards to the regulation of new breeding technologies, especially something like CRISPR technologies? I've known there's been quite a battle between government and industry role players. Your take, what's the current status?
Yeah. Let's start with the obvious. South Africa decided to regulate all genome editing type technologies as GMO at the moment. The one complexity that's in there, what you refer, you ask a question specifically about the technology. But in the end of the day, what you regulate, and regulation is just a form of risk management. And what is the risk that we manage when we talk about GMOs or whatever? It's the organism. It's actually in the name. It's the organism. It's the product that you have to regulate. But South Africa, again, it's a history. In the 1990s, we actually established the definition of GMO in South Africa. Now, when they look back and say, should we regulate this new technology, they do it in context. And the interpretation, I should finish my sentence, they do it in context of that 1995 definition. And then the interpretation here is done in terms of a legal argument. And this is I've got a scientific background, I'm a risk assessor, and I would say we must look at the risk and we love the term risk-appropriate regulation. And this is where we need to get to. At the moment, it's not there. South Africa and at the moment, New Zealand are the only countries in the world that still consider all genome editing as GMO.
Maybe, I don't want to speak out of turn, but maybe I can add an industry perspective also on breeding. So breeding is seen as one of the innovative engines for us going forward, and so rightly so, the 4th generation of breeding is definitely precision breeding, and we're going to move from selecting to designing, right? And so with AI models, we have this work we can ingest multiple different input points and really design for a particular need, growers' need in a geography, and so that is something that's real and is being worked on. The other thing that's happening is there's different ways now that the breeding cycles are being spread up, right? So it used to take, I think, 5 to 6 years to finish a breeding cycle on corn. Now, with glasshouse technologies, it's done between 4 to 5 months, right? So it's a phenomenal acceleration. So that will happen in other crops as well. And then I think the next frontier is the simulation of the genetics in a particular grower's environment, right? And digital tools will give us that ability to shorten this period where a grower needs to test a new variety and for instance, I know in tomatoes specifically, in high-tech tomatoes at Glasshouse in the Netherlands, it takes those growers up to 3.5 years, 4 years to optimize the genetics under their conditions. Now, digital will help us speed that up and will simulate the next frontier of simulation of those genetics.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to make a 180 turn now. But again, starting with Murray. We spoke earlier about the pressure and about the cost pinch as a reality for potato growers. How do you see transport, ineffective transport, affecting the potato growers' livelihood?
Sure, yeah. Transport is one of those key inputs that we have in our business that is sort of hard to get around. We've got to move a certain mass from one place to another, and it's tricky to find a more intelligent way of doing it. So I think it's an industry that is, or a gap specifically, that is absolutely ripe for disruption. I think there's lots of scope, to try and control it on the farm. A lot of farmers have brought their transport in-house, which brings its own level of complications. Having to run a micro transport company along with a farm is complicated and technical, and there's a reason why there are logistics companies in the world, because they are experts at what they do. So on the farms, what we try and do is basically move less of the less valuable product off your farm. So stricter sorting in your pack house, making sure that you are transporting a higher value product per ton, stricter sorting, cheaper packaging, all this type of thing to try and get that transport cost as low as possible. So I think the area where a holistic logistics solution could be really interesting in terms of disruption is not just the physical moving of the product from one place to another, but the information interface with clients and ordering and packaging it exactly right in our warehouses to get the correct product to the correct customer, which will then increase our margin, and thereby theoretically and practically we will be transporting a higher value product as opposed to just a bunch of potentially sometimes ugly potatoes to the market and hoping for the best. This, I think, has very much come to an end in terms of how we can approach transport in the agricultural industry.
Do you want to say something? Pieter, you're looking at me.
a couple of months ago, I was asked to do a keynote at a company called Match Exchange. And although they don't play in the potato space, they have done it in grain, livestock, and so forth. And the best way to explain is that they are the Uber for farmers. So you can literally on your app say, listen, I want to sell so much. Who wants it? Who's available to transport it for me, and what's the best possible price? So they link all of these capabilities together. It's actually quite interesting to see the impact they had on livestock and grain and so forth. And Quibus is their CEO. He's sitting here in Paul, and I asked him, but I'm going to talk on potatoes. Have you moved into that space? He said, not yet. We've got a couple of these other key areas to experiment with, but I think it's close, where a model, and it might not be them, but someone else, but having an Uber for the world, for the farmers, where you can literally on an app be able to find a buyer for your produce and have the best possible transport solution. And I think this optimization of the ecosystem where everything is connected together, it has unlocked huge value in the world of logistics. Maybe it's time that the farmers start using those technologies as well.
So if I can add to that. So I think if you look at transport, there's the ability to optimize is in two places. I think you can minimize your trip cost. How do you minimize your trip cost? Vehicle technology moving very quickly. Things are changing. You get the right vehicle, the right application. If you look at your transport cost, high percentage of that is fuel. We are using lots of technology now where we get second geolocations, we plot routes, we understand the vehicle type, we understand the vehicle make, and we can calculate how much fuel should have been burnt. Because typically how fuel is managed, you'll say this vehicle type has 46 liters per 100. We on a specific route now are able to tell you how much fuel was wasted, where it was wasted, and what was the behavior, and the driver can now be debriefed in real time. The second part, and I would say the bigger opportunity in your network, is you have flows that are complementary to the market. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a tech-heavy Uber solution, but if you find partners where you could create share value networks, where you create visibility and optimization. So let's take retail delivers into their stores in areas where you send potatoes back. Those vehicles are largely monitored, tracked, and have excellent visibility and control in terms of tight delivery windows because, supply of product and consumer demand is dependent on it. Those vehicles could easily be integrated into your outbound or your transport into the markets or to clients. And I think the risk of your transport and approaching it in a Uber sort of fashion is that there's risk of lateness. And I think if you don't have the visibility, you overcompensate and create inefficiencies for lateness. We see that everywhere. And then rules are put in place to manage lateness and events that cost lots of money historically. So I think shared networks and partner networks can be an easy win. And there are lots of discrete players that will complement your networks.
William, we know that the status of South Africa's road and railway infrastructure and management of the state-owned entity, Transnet, Sunroll, is not optimized yet. That's being very diplomatic. Yet, DP World made this huge investment commitment to do business in South Africa. What's the logic behind that?
So firstly, I was hoping as a sponsor I'd get the easier questions, but I see that ship has sailed. So I think we agree that is there opportunity to be had in our infrastructure, in our roads, in our rails, and our ports and terminals in terms of efficiency. We agree. We are in partnership with the government, sitting at the table to try and unlock that. I think our approach to inefficiency and utilization and opportunities is to have specific and bespoke solutions where you set baselines, you quantify the inefficiency, you create digital twins, you manage it in real time, you understand what behaviors have to change, how you manage that, and how you actually put it in somebody's face to drive a behavior change. So we are, I think, if we look at our set of assets across the continent, I think we are well positioned to lead the change. I think we are confident because of the customer base that we have. We partner with some of the largest users of that infrastructure, that we have a seat at the table and we have a voice. So we are optimistic about our ability to influence that change.
Before opening up the question and answers from the crowd, perhaps just a last topic on sustainability or regenerative agriculture. Perhaps, Murray, starting with you, water, land, skilled labor, key nutrients, you could sort of all couple them under the word scarcity and scarce resources. How do you as grower, and then perhaps Chris, you can also jump in, how do you as grower manage, protect within an environment where you have to stay economic viable?
Yeah, I think it's like most things in life, it is a lot about a balance. I think there's been so much financial pressure on the agricultural industry that most of us have been forced to really, through crop rotations, use our farms as effectively as possible and plant it as often as possible with various crops in a hope of generating revenue. I think as we're going forward, we mustn't look at the land issue particularly as just a scarce resource. It's healthy and arable land that is the real scarce resource. And I think we're going to have to start looking at it a lot within South Africa, particularly with a crop like potatoes that is so intense on the field. We're producing, potentially up to 60 tons a hectare of food all under the ground that does all sorts of things to the soil. And crop rotation, longer cycles between crops to give the soil opportunity to rest and regenerate, I think is going to be crucial, because we're not looking at total arable land available, we're looking at productive arable land available. And we must be really careful that we look after our resources in that way. Water as well, I think there's been a lot of advancements by South African farmers to manage their water in a more effective way. The Centre Pivot obviously opened up a whole new world to South African farmers, and we're sort of dialing that back and doing what we can, watering at night where possible, to get back to the soil, trying to use a more holistic pest control management system that includes biologicals, I think is also absolutely crucial for our path forward. And scarcity generally, I mean, as scarcity increases, price increases, and I think you can see that with the price of agricultural land in South Africa. It really is increasing quite dramatically, potentially plateaued out, but I think it's increased within proportion to the scarcity that it is. So managing all these scarce resources is a challenge that we mustn't lose sight of in the long run. As farmers, it's very easy to look at short-term profits, but the majority of farmers don't have a short-term outlook on their farms. It's always a much longer-term outlook for potentially multiple generations, but definitely decades. And we need to look after our soil as far as possible.
So I think, Chris, maybe my answer is, how do we bring new innovation, new technology at a cost-effective way to be utilized by our growers within this environmental friendly or regenerative agriculture realm?
Yeah, I think growers and farmers can expect from the traditional input providers a shift from selling products to selling solutions bundled as a system. So if you look at all these companies now, they've diversified into very sophisticated seed and trait portfolio, and as I said before, state-of-the-art chemistry and a digital portfolio of decision support tools that now can be bundled as a system to drive a particular outcome on the farm, right? And so beyond yield and profit, look at carbon capture, emissions, and water, biodiversity, and soil health. And so you'll see a more holistic approach to your point of companies getting involved rather than being just product orientated. And it will get to a point, and it's already there, where these systems will become so reliable and proven over a period of time that there would even be guarantees offered on using the system as prescribed, right? And so that I think you can see coming. It's already happening in certain countries, and you'll see some of that happening here. But talking to the cost effectiveness, let's talk about the adjacent markets and spaces developing under this regenerative ag vision, right? So you talk about precision application. I think that's obvious, and that has been a concern about what is it going to do to the chemical market. But you have to put the grower in the middle of the conversation, right? And it's about the grower and making sure that they're successful. And so precision application, I think, is an area that could potentially provide savings. There's on the biostimulants. The carbon-rich synthetic nitrogen production, it provides, I think, the equivalent of 3.3 billion people's food on their table. But it contributes 3% to the greenhouse emissions. And so now the new technology is to look at these, what they call carbon-fixing bacteria, right, which is, interestingly enough, not all crops need the same fertilizer. Like soybean needs far less than the others, because it's got a certain bacteria that captures nitrogen and provides that fertilization free to the plant, right? And so there are people working on that technology today to see how we could potentially take, after reading the DNA code, take that and clip that into other microbes that then potentially populates other crops' roots and do the same functioning. So that's also something that's coming. We could be look forward to. The carbon market is also an interesting one, I think, right? And we spoke about the digital platforms and what that does to the supply chain and cutting out and making certain pieces of the current supply chain redundant and freeing up costs there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Some of the sort of the key points that I hear is digital platforms, interconnected. But for some reason, I'm not seeing that actually happening. I'm not seeing growers utilizing platforms. Murray, perhaps just lastly, to your point or your view on this, we've got a lot of data, or we think that we have a lot of data. Where do you think we should look, we as industry, we as growers should look for opportunities to actually transfer that data into insights that we can use to farm more profitable at the end of the day? I hear a lot of things. I hear platforms putting the grower in contact with the end consumer, with the retailer. I hear about, digital tools, leveraging data. But how do we actually make that practical and make that the truth for the grower?
No, that's a very difficult question. I think as an industry as a whole, we are a little bit of a slow-moving ship for various reasons. One of them being our iterations are so slow that it's a sort of an annual crop, so we only get a few chances to innovate in our careers, sort of 30 or 40 times, whatever it is, whereas other people get to do it on a daily or weekly basis. But I think a little bit of patience is needed with us farmers in terms of adopting the new technologies that are there already. I think there are incredible platforms that are in the market at the moment that are being used, possibly not to their fullest potential at the moment, but it is coming. I want to be kind to our farmers generally, but there is a natural tendency for the older generation to adopt new technology slower than the younger generation. And I think as a younger generation of farmers in their 20s and 30s at the moment that are now becoming decision makers within their business, I think there is a very rapid adoption of these technologies. So I think it is happening, but slowly. Be patient.
Yeah, I think Murray hit a really good spot there. I mean, digital is not about digital. It's not about technology. It's about people, and it's about change, right? It's the opportunity the digital tool presents for the change, and the trade-off needs to be made whether that the cost of implementing that change will actually drive the benefit that you need, right? And so it's not about don't get lost with the technology, don't get lost with digital. It's about people. And about people making change in their operations. And that's super hard. And that's why it takes a lot of time, right?
And perhaps a mindset shift.
Totally, yeah.
So we apply a rule that we say technology must have a payback. It cannot be technology for the sake of technology. And the payback should be understandable to the person who's using it. I think if you look at your innovation, you should look at it in two buckets, would be my advice, is I'd say you should look at it as a collective. So what fights do you need to pick as a collective? Because I think that's probably the one that catapults it. I think if you can find collective technology and innovation, I think I agree 100% with what you said. The suppliers to the farm will more and more. We sell solutions and we sell outcomes. It's about saying, we will guarantee a commercial outcome or a speed of delivery, and your suppliers will move that way. I think that the trick here will be to understand what collective fights you want to pick in terms of adopting technology.
Yeah, good point. Yes, Henny.
I just want to champion local innovation. I think it's important, lots of solutions will come from different places, whatever. But I think that integrated approach to innovation where the people that know what the market wants talk to the starting point of the innovation system. And I think, organizations like this, industry representative organizations, they play a very critical role in that communication. I've seen through my career, kind of the academic, you can't just fund academics to research because they will always be academics first. We have, in terms of the whole bio-innovation pipeline, we have this chasm which we have to cover, and I think we need to put bodies in there. And then a second quick point I want to make, again, coming back to the genetics, I think there's a lot of mention here of some technologies. You know, it's difficult to adopt, and is it context relevant and all those type of issues. I think, again, one of the things that we see in genetics in agriculture across many different crops, you know, by the time that it gets to the farm, it's like a plug-and-play technology. It's very complicated at some level, but by the time it gets to the farm, you know, that genetics is, that complexity is irrelevant as long as it works on the farm and the rest of the system.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with that comment from Henny, I want to open up the floor for some questions and answers. I know there will be a microphone around, so if you can just raise your hand, state your name, and then fire away. This is the highlight of this panel discussion, so I want to urge you to please take part. Because if there's really no questions and answers, I will be forced to close the session, and I've got time. I do have. William doesn't have. He's got to catch a flight back, but I have time. So any questions? Any questions from? Yes, Willie.
Given the fact that there's, I think, more confusion than anything else, if I'm listening to the biggest message, I just want to ask one question. And probably, Pieter, you using my name in vain so many times. I just want to know what the login details to that digital tool is so that we can log in and carry on with our lives. Anyone in the panel can answer me that, because I think, and extending on the question as well, we hear so many thoughts about so much happening in the digital space, but it's flipping all over the show. How do you navigate this?
So in terms of digital logistics, there's a lot happening. So if you look at the rise of digital freight exchanges, it was a global leading logistics trend, sort of if you step back 3 years. I again think that is a collective fight. I think you have power and buying power as a collective. I think to go down that road as an individual can pose questions and asks that are difficult. You need scale to get the benefit of these things. So I think my advice there would be pick a partner, work with a partner, and get the partner to give you an outcome. So, you know, don't look at it as logistics. Look at it as an outcome in terms of a cost saving, service excellence, visibility. I think if you, that would be my advice in that space.
Yeah, maybe a comment on digital. So we start talking about digitizing the core and then digital tools outside of the operations, right? And so digitizing the core and driving a digital operating model is something that you should all look at, right? It's happening everywhere. And you need to start engaging somewhere. But I'm totally here with my colleague William here. Don't just chase digital for the technology or, you know, for what it promises. Make sure that it commits to an outcome and it delivers the outcome. And when it does deliver the outcome, make sure that you share some of that upside with the supplier of that technology, because that incentivizes them to do more, right? And yeah, so I would say just focus on outcomes.
Yes.
Good afternoon. For me, it's a bag full of a lot of intelligent things happening. I'm representing the informal sector, fruit and veg side. So I can't speak for the whole country. I speak only for Western Cape and only a certain region in the Western Cape. We are buying 60% of your potatoes in Epic Market, right? And the quality that we're getting, it's very questionable. But with all the technology and all the things that is in front of you for investments and all that, good luck with that part. But from where I stand, we want to let the poor people eat. And that is why we are here. Yes, it's a lot of information to consume, to digest, and to work with. The only thing that I want to ask on the high level. All this technology that you speak of, is a trial and tested in other countries? That's number one. If it is, I ask, or my recommendation to Potato SA, to do a feasibility study. See what is the actual impact in that particular countries. Because we shift the gear. We are happy here for what I do. I like to feed people, buy and sell. That's how simple things are. But it's not so simple with all the politics. I can understand that. I also represent the informal sector on provincial level, where they actually make these policies, that I can relate to the bio guy or some of the technology and how the policy actually impact into all of those things. I can also understand most of the frustration the farmers got with the irrigation, with the water, with electricity, and all the compliance that they need to go through. I don't understand all because I'm not a farmer. I only want to buy and sell. The barriers between the informal sector and the actual farmer, there's a huge gap. A huge gap that wasn't there in the past. Now it is there, with all due respect. But our concern is the poor people, the one that's going to consume your product. All these farmers, we are worried how that potato is living amongst them. And through the whole ecosystem, how it gets there. We don't want to understand all the other politics that goes with it. We want to say, how do we get it? Why all the commission structures with the markets and all of that, and why the turnaround of all the potato in the actual market, and why the pricing. So some of all that information needs to get filtered up right to the consumer, so that the consumer can appreciate what the farmer is going through, because they don't know. They just see the potato is expensive. They don't know why. And that, I think that is another platform that we need to sort of open up that conversation so that somebody can educate right down to the one. We are just the buying and selling part, but we understand potatoes. Sometimes we outsmart the farmer with his own product. No, I'm telling you, that's why there's so many barriers on the farmers. We can't go straight with our money to the actual farmer now because of technology. We don't understand the technology in the farmers yet, but we're cutting down on the packaging and the transport, so make the price better. No, he's looking for the best price. That's why I got the agent. But
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because we're time constricted, I have to cut you short. I'm going to give you an opportunity. Please state one or two short of your key questions that you'd like the panel to answer. If I hear you correctly, the one is definitely about stressing affordability for the consumer. You have a second one. Please keep it short and brief. I want to give the others also a chance. Thank you. And perhaps just your name.
My name is Suleiman. I just want to ask, since there's so many potato farmers and so much of land is used for potato, why the scarcity and the quality of the scarcity that gets to the actual consumer? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think if I can put you on the spot, Willie, if you want to perhaps just have a reply and a quick overview with regards to market demand and challenges around quality, and then I'm gonna end off. I'm gonna take one more question before closing the session. Thank you very much, Willie.
Thank you. I think you're going to have an opportunity to talk tomorrow as well. We need to get a very concentrated conversation going. But these are the questions that needs to be answered. And this is the reason why we're building this whole methodology around understanding things. One of the points that he did mention is the fact that consumers needs to understand the difficulties farmers are experiencing. And I'm hearing things like digital twins, I'm hearing simulations, and I'm hearing the ability to actually paint a picture with data. And this is probably one of the things that I think that can bring messages closer from farmer to consumer level. So I think stick with us in the whole process as we unpack this. There will definitely be some answers at the end of the day. And if you don't find that by the closing of tomorrow, you can ask the question again.
Thank you. Thank you, Willie.
Janet, if I may just make a couple of comments to the gentleman. When I started farming some time ago, I spoke to a neighbor of mine and asked for some advice. And he said, Murray, you come from a corporate background. and I'm sure you can make a very nice spreadsheet, but make sure you have good quality potatoes first, and it'll make you more money than a very complicated spreadsheet. So what I'm trying to get at is that the focus for the farmer supplying the industry still needs to have a better quality product. And the poor quality that you are talking about is often for completely exogenous reasons that the farmers have no control of. I can promise you that we are not deliberately sending poor quality potatoes to the market and would prefer to send good quality potatoes to the market. That's my first comment. The second one is you mentioned 60% of your potatoes are being bought on the fresh produce market. I would like to implore all of our role players in the industry to please appreciate our fresh produce markets for what they are. We have an unbelievably unique system in South Africa that we've managed to maintain our fresh produce markets. It might not be digital and it might not be a sexy option, but it is the most effective way of price discovery in your industry. Your one-on-one with your market agent is the best way to find the correct price. So as farmers, we feel the exact same as you, except the opposite end of it. We send our product to the markets, hoping for the best, and then our agent lets us know what he managed to sell it for. So we also have no control, and we also don't know why there are price fluctuations the way they are very often, unless we have a great relationship with an honest market agent. So farmers are price takers. We do not set the price within our industry. We have to take whatever the market has. That is what our price is. We don't have the privilege of other industries like the grain industry or whatever it is to silo up our stock for a year or two. We got to sell it today because it's fresh produce. So I think when there is a price increase, it is definitely never just because. There is a supply reason for it, because supply and demand is dictating price every single time, and this is a perfect price discovery mechanism.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take one more question from the crowd before closing the session. There's a hand there. Thank you. Can I ask you just to present yourself, state your name, surname, and then fire away, and please keep it short and brief.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for a very informative session. I've written a couple of points down just so I don't forget them. From the presentation, it seems that time is a luxury. A farmer will have to become more technically savvy much sooner than before. A generation of experience is not something that's at our disposal. We can't leave anything to chance by the sounds of it, because the land that's arable is getting smaller and we need to produce more. So my question really is, the panel up there, what is the industry or industry players doing to inform how better the generations that come now to farm adjust? If you look at other industries, there are short courses and that type of thing. Unfortunately, not all of us have the opportunity to go to universities, and I wonder whether those universities are training technical know-how that is required to farm in the future. So my question is the industry or are its role players doing enough to afford farmers short answers or short ways to learn new ways to do things?
Hello. Okay. Yes, thank you very much. If I hear you correctly, you're asking what is industry, what is role players doing to empower farmers or other role players to navigate through these through this environment of change, and how we're helping you to actually navigate through the different technologies that is available in the marketplace. Murray, perhaps you can answer that firsthand.
Yeah, from a training and educational perspective, short courses and that type of thing, if your question is sort of a short course in learning how to farm. I think that'll be a tricky thing for the industry or anyone, any educational institution to actually implement, because in my opinion, so much of successful farming is 100% vocational. It's on-the-job training. We find that if my practices versus my neighbor's practices can be reasonably far apart, but because it'll be, and not easily transferable from one farm to the other, because of a multitude of micro factors that make that farm slightly different to this one, whether it be temperature or wind direction or soil type or all sorts of things. So you have to actually learn it on the job. There is no shortcut to agriculture, which is why often agriculture is a multi-generational business, and the multi-generational agricultural entities tend to survive, is because you need to be able to learn that from a young age, vocationally, as you go along, to learn how to successfully farm this piece of land. Farms are not widgets, they are not fungible, and one farm is not like the other. So there is no generic course that can be given to teach you how to successfully farm, in my opinion.
I don't know if anyone wants to react on the availability of data, of knowledge, and actually our ability to learn ourselves. I mean, the internet is all over. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of YouTube videos, and I'm not sure if there's already a short course in AI or the application of AI, but I mean, internet, if you've got connectivity, that's an important factor, but I think we're in a privileged situation at this stage where knowledge is actually very accessible with a click of a mouse or whatever. Perhaps you want to elaborate on that, Pieter.
So as a person in the education space, I'm sorry, but you can't do deep knowledge in a short course. Well, what's quite interesting is that if someone wants to become a taxi driver in London, guess what they do? They give you a motorbike, and for 3 years, you need to drive around with your little motorbike in London to develop something they call the knowledge. It's not training. You can't get that deep knowledge by simply taking a course. And that's the sad part. You need to develop a deep knowledge. And my advice would be go and work on a farm for 3 years. Learn what practices they have, and then go to your own farm and then apply that knowledge perhaps in a different way because of these differences. But it's not something you can do in a 2 or 3 week course. Yes, you can sharpen your skills. Once you have got the deep knowledge, you can become better, and perhaps one of the key things is the deep knowledge may allow you not to use technology, which I don't like, because technology makes our world cheaper. You know, technology is the key driver that creates deflation. It's what drives society, and that's the use of technology. So I am a big supporter of technology, but you need to do that on deep knowledge. So there's no shortcuts to deep knowledge. You need to put in the hard work. And that's unfortunately the problem with deep vocational training. You know, the world is shallowing out, and that world of deep knowledge isn't there anymore. So my plea is, put in the miles, go and work, get a foreman that have worked for a couple of years, let him then provide, or her, provide you with that deep insight. There is not a shortcut to success.
Yeah, I agree with all the speakers and what they've said. For us, we're focusing on digital as the way to do the agronomic knowledge transfer of the future. But a lot of these farming operations, to the points that were made, it's not that easy just to transfer that knowledge in terms of the operational aspects of the peculiarities and the uniqueness of certain environments. And you look at the glasshouse production in the Netherlands. You know, that's why the Dutch are everywhere in the world where there's glasshouse production. That knowledge has just not been able to be transferable that easily, right? And so, but for us, digital will have to play a role to do that agronomic knowledge transfer.
I want to focus on a little different aspect, as knowledge as a strategic value for an industry. How we learn it is what we've discussed now, but if we all spoke about technologies today, so if there's something that's going to really change the way that you do things, and it's potentially going to have an influence on your industry, you have to be prepared for that. So that may, for example, require you to have specific skill development type of interventions. And from my perspective, again, what I can refer to is, genetic engineering is per definition a biologist, molecular biologist work. But in the end of the day, you deal with regulators, for example, that do not necessarily have that background. So I can't just say, the information is available there, because it is definitely. But we can't just leave it up to that. As if it's a strategic goal for the industry, you need to get involved in those type of communication and training and education things. Another example is the one that was referred to earlier, is the general, the market. If there are issues that the market do not understand, health issues. I mean, I used to work in the sugar industry as well. There's huge issues about, the health impact of sugar, and it had a huge impact on the industry. So they had to get involved in those type of things. So the point is, get involved if there's a technology that can really be disruptive, that you are prepared as an industry. And then the second one, it may be very broad. It doesn't have to involve, vocational training or whatever. It can be a broader communication function as well.
And maybe to your point of mindset, right? Maybe it's embracing this continuous learning. You never stop learning, right? And that's maybe not a mindset that's prevalent everywhere.
I think the old saying of knowledge is power is still relevant, even though everything is changing. And I do think perhaps knowledge is more accessible, or insights, or information, let's call it information perhaps, is more available, more accessible than it was 10, 15 years ago. But perhaps the challenge is making perhaps more informed or packaging of that data. Is going to be very, very important to make good decisions, sustainable decisions. I'm going to ask each one of you, perhaps just for a take-home message, a very short closing comment that you'd like to make before we're going to commence with this session. There's just going to be a short video of Inteligro, is actually the sponsor for this panel discussion as well. So leading into that, perhaps just one or two sentences in closing off this panel discussion.
So a couple of years ago, I spoke about bioreactors and growing meat inside bioreactors, cultured meat. We spoke about these vertical farms that popped up all across the world where you can actually plant your own food in your backyard. Do you know how many of those failed? So in the last 2 to 3 years, a huge amount of them shut down because the deep knowledge of how to literally farm wasn't there. And a small little microbe could actually destroy an entire crop. So do not underestimate the challenge of becoming a farmer and the deep knowledge that you have and the importance you farmers have in feeding the nation. So although we glibly talk about new technologies and how it will save some things, the value of deep knowledge, hard work and farming, we appreciate what you put in, and we don't always appreciate the difficulty and challenges that you face. And for the supporting industries, from everything to logistics to the world of chemical and biology, we as consumers and my children that love potato chips, thank you dearly. Thank you.
So I think I'd like to echo the point about food security. Functioning society relies on food security, so I think that's something that we shouldn't underestimate. I think don't underestimate how technology will change your world. It's going to come faster and more furiously than we can ever imagine, but I think it's a good thing. So I think it's about a mindset of embracing that.
Yeah, I would echo that, right? I think whatever technology you can imagine is stacking up really well right now. From what we can see around the vision of regenerative ag, the technologies will continue to speed up and continue to develop in different spaces. I think the biggest concern is, or the biggest challenge maybe, is the adoption of those technologies on the farm. And again, speaking about digital and other technologies, it's not about the technology per se, but about the change that you are prepared to drive in your operations. And having an open mindset and looking and using maybe as a North Star these outcomes that these technologies can drive on your farm, and being experimental and open-minded about trying those.
I would say be informed and be aware of what's happening around you, and when innovation presents itself, it can add value to your context. Be ready to embrace it. It's not technology for technology's sake, but it's what it can add to your value system or your value chain.
So the slogan for this Congress, I think, is 2050, the future is now. And I really do believe that. I think it's a very apt statement to make. The problem that we face is that not all of us are living in the future. It is here, though. Every area, production area within South Africa is a leader in one specific focus area of potato farming. And what we need to do to live in the future and to adopt all these great new technologies is to talk to each other as different farmers, to share information, share ideas, share strategies. A lot of the new technologies that are being spoken about, they only work once there's a critical mass of people using them. So we need to talk to each other and sort of word of mouth market it to each other, so there's a critical mass so that we can start using it. A digital marketplace is wonderful, but there need to be sellers using it at the same time, else it doesn't work. And we are living in the future, we just need to use it.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's the end of our panel discussion. I would like to thank all the panelists. I would like to thank the audience for taking part in the discussions. Your valuable input is appreciated. And the insights shared today will undoubtedly set a strong foundation for the discussions to come tomorrow. And with that, I think there will be a video playing. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Stefan Steenekamp, a technical marketing specialist from Inteligro. South African agriculture consistently faces pressures from various external and internal factors that threaten profitability. Securing the future of potato farming requires embracing advanced biological solutions and data-driven strategies. By doing so, we can enhance growers' return on investment through improved market access, increased yields, and enhanced quality. Intelibio Solutions forms the cornerstone of our integrated potato management strategy, emphasizing sustainability through a holistic approach that incorporates biological products. Our approach focuses first on root and soil conditioning, and second on supporting crop resilience against abiotic and biotic stresses, thereby safeguarding yield, quantity, and quality. We begin by establishing robust root systems during crop establishment, ensuring vigorous plant growth. Throughout the season, we prioritize energy production and support the plant through critical growth phases such as tuber initiation, bulking, and maturation. Each biological product, foliar feed, and biostimulant is applied for a specific purpose at the precise time and in an appropriate amount to ensure the desired outcome is achieved. This holistic approach not only protects the plants from stress factors, but also enhances yield quality and quantity by aligning with Intelibio principles. A critical aspect of this initiative involves generating data from various Intelibio potato trial plots. Through the analysis and application of trial data, growers can accurately manage inputs, optimize resource utilization, and develop sustainable practices to ensure profitability amidst changing conditions. In light of the theme 2050 is now, our objective is to implement comprehensive crop management strategies that incorporate Intelibio, technology, and data-driven insights. We recognize that sustainable potato production starts at farm level, and our approach is tailored to empower growers to achieve long-term success and environmental stewardship. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gents, thank you very much. Thanks to our panel. I think they deserve another round of applause. Thank you very much. Thanks, Janet, for being a professional facilitator. We really enjoyed it, and we would like, as a small appreciation, token of our appreciation, just a small gift from Dirk and Willie. Ladies and gents, just bear with me. We will be 2 minutes, just a few arrangements. handing out some export potatoes from Sandveld.